There we go. All right. There we go. See, that's my sound guy's here, and then my video guy, he's not. So, does anybody have any follow-up, or can we close that door? Any follow-up, any questions on the last couple of chapters or last week's session before we dive into this week's? Don't forget, we're going 2 chapters at a time. So last week was chapters 1 and 2. This week was chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 is the longest chapter in the book. So you're finished with that marathon chapter. And so from now on, they're all shorter. So we're going to go through some of the concepts of chapters 3 and 4 tonight. But does anybody have anything from last week? Going once, going twice. Aaron? All right. Here we go. So how many people remember the discussion on walls in chapter 3? Chapter 3 talked a lot about walls that we put up. Does anybody remember what some of the walls were? Denial, withdrawal, isolation, fantasy, displacement, and we're going to get them all. Rage, passive aggression. Man, some people did some reading, man. All right. Is that all of them? Yeah, and validation. Very good. So, we have all these walls that we build up. Let's talk about them, though. I mean, when it comes to marriage, I mean, these are walls we can put up with anything. But obviously, when it comes to marriage, it becomes even more detrimental than if we had a wall of isolation up at work. I mean, it's going to be detrimental, but isolation in your marriage can really spell disaster. So, somebody talk to me about any of these that really stood out to you. All of them. Or we're going to be here a while. Taylor? Yep. So if you didn't hear, just not dealing with issues. Something happens, you just wait for things to cool down, don't really ever address it. How many people would agree that not addressing an issue and then it cools down for now probably isn't the best way to handle an issue? Right? I think everybody kind of understands that intuitively, but when you're in the moment, or if you're in the place where you need to address that issue, obviously it becomes hard to go from, I know this isn't correct, but this is going to be a tough one to talk about or to address or to bring up or whatever, so you have to be able to cross that barrier. We'll talk about how that works and what the chapter takes us through. Anything else? Anybody else? Something that stood out? Invalidation. Oh, okay.
You don't even realize you take out whatever is going on with you at the moment. You immediately on your spouse's, and she says it in the book about she's a mother of 3.
Right.
And her husband will call and he'll say something so innocent, and she's immediately just like, ugh.
Yeah.
I hate your face.
I hate your face. Yeah. And I'm on the phone. Yeah. How many people can absolutely attest you've done that? There's stuff that you're angry or upset or whatever over here, and then spouse didn't really do a whole lot. I mean, just showed up, hey, how you doing? And then bam! It's like all that stuff went on them. Anybody ever done that? I mean, we're all human. We probably have all done that. What else? Anything else that stood out? Denial. So explain denial. Right. She has a friend at work. Uh-huh. Yeah. And this gets into chapter 4 too, which was all about really pride. And she talks about, where we get the word narcissism from and all of that, but how that people that are proud have a very hard time admitting when they're part of the problem, right? And she talks about it. I've read other books where they talk about there is no marital problem that is 100% one person's fault. Now, it might be like 99 and 1, okay? Because let's be honest, there's times where it's clearly like not 50-50. Oh, this is an even split, But there are very rare or maybe not any cases where it's literally 100% this person's fault. Now, you can have a party that's more of the innocent party. This is blowing up on them or whatever it is. But ultimately, when there's a problem in a marriage, now an individual argument or something like that, okay, that might just be one person. But when it comes to a problem in a marriage, issues that have gone on, it's rare that it's 100% one person, right? So she talks about that in that book, but a lot of that will stem from denial. That's you. That's your issue. You're the problem, right? Whereas instead of sitting down and talking about where the issues are, now we've done quite a bit of like marital counseling with couples. And I've actually seen this in my experience, probably not as much as some of these folks writing these books, but I can tell you it's, again, very rare. You start talking about a problem, and clearly it's more one-sided. There's an issue with this person, and it's 75, 85%, but when you start talking through it, asking the person who is the problem, what's going on, what happened, then you start to realize, oh, snap. I was contributing to that, right? Remember Mark's hurt feelings in chapter 3? She talks about this big, tatted up, like rough-looking guy, like busting out in tears and crying in her office. All right, and he was angry, like he would just go off on his wife, just snap at her at the drop of a hat. But what was his underlying problem? Anybody remember? Oh, it was daddy issues, really, right? Rejection. His father, you're not good enough type of person, trying to control his life, and you're not doing things the way I want to, or I think it should be done. And so when his wife would do small things, like, what's the example when they went out and they were doing like the gardening day, and she was, just looking over, and he's gardening, and there's some weeds over there, and she's, right? And she's like, well, are you going to get those weeds? And he just was like, blah, right? Well, now, knowing what his issues are, because he was the majority of the problem, right? But now she knows ways that she could be a little bit more understanding or a little bit more soft in her approach, right? Instead of, hey, you going to get those? Right? Well, thank you so much for all this. And were you going to get those? I don't know. But so it helped their marriage because she started to understand and empathize with his background, his childhood. Where is he coming from? Where's his anger coming from? Right? So, and she says, that generally anger is looked at as a secondary emotion because most people don't just walk around just angry. You're angry for a reason, and that reason is usually the underlying emotional issue. So, your feelings are hurt, and some people might bust out in tears but a lot of people, the mechanism for defense is anger. So you're hurt, you're embarrassed, you feel insecure, and you lash out in anger to defend yourself. So anger is not a primary emotion, she says, it's secondary. So when you see people get angry, what can we do? Right? We can de-escalate stuff, and we can also look at, okay, so Taylor's getting angry. Should we look at the anger, or should we try to understand, okay, what's causing the anger? Right? Are they stressed about something? Again, stressed out about work. Come home and there's, a couple of things you can do. You can suppress, which eventually will probably bubble up and explode. You can come home and, just cry in the shower and just, every day. Or you can come home and kick the dog or whatever, See, where is this anger, where is it coming from is what she was saying. And that helps get to some of the underlying problems. Anything else? What else do we have here? Anybody want to talk about? Fantasy. Yeah. Right. I mean, think about, I want to be able to go on this trip. Well, let's sit down and budget and see if no, we'll just make it work, right? And you've got in your mind you want to do this family trip, but if you were to sit down and budget for it, it's not realistic, right? Well, how's that going to play out when you either have the trip and come home and you're bogged down with all kinds of debt and stress, or you never get to go because it was unrealistic, right? Now that's a simple example, but unrealistic expectations of where the family should be, what our spouse should be doing, unrealistic. It's just unrealistic expectation. Taylor. Right. Right. Yeah, you got 3,000 Facebook friends, but you can't really hold a conversation for more than 15 minutes without being like, well, okay. Like, what? Right. And that's and that really is, our society really is that way. There's studies done and all kinds of stuff on social media. Social media is, it can be very detrimental. It really can. There's a lot of good things that you can use social media for, but it really can be it's escapism, right? And there's a lot of other things. What are some other things that people might escape into? Now, they could be good or they could be bad, good things that you escape into or bad things. But what are some things, somebody over here, what's some things we could escape into? Amanda? Work. Right? Is work a bad thing? No. After a long, hard, 18 days in a row, you might be like, yeah, work's a bad thing. But pouring yourself so much into work that you don't have to deal, right? That becomes a problem. A workaholic is still an addict. Just, maybe won't kill you as fast as a heroin addict, but it's still, you're an addict. And it could be chasing, money, but again, back to, realistic expectations. If you got to work so much that your family is paying the price for it, why do that, right? Well, I got to afford this. Is that really that important, right? I know people that absolute lost their kids. I mean, they're just relationally, not that like their kids are hating them and not ever talking to them or whatever, but could have a great relationship with their children, but they were too busy, focused on, need to provide. Well, you need to provide, but you don't need that car or that house or those elaborate vacations. Whatever it might be. Now, if you can afford that car and that house and those elaborate vacations without sacrificing your family on the altar of those things, whatever, go for it. But it can be a problem, it can be an issue. And a lot of that, again, can be derived from fantastic ideas of where, and again, everybody's different. Some people are poor when they're young, and when they get older, they're fine with just meager whatever. It doesn't matter how much money they have. They can make a bunch of money, and they're fine with basic stuff. Other people are poor, and when they get a little bit of money, they think, I never had it when I was young, I'm going to have it now. That just depends on you as a person. But ultimately, we need to control those fantastical things and make sure that we're realistic in our marriage. Anything else? Isolation. Talk to me. Right. He actually goes through the seven walls of Bo Tinsley. It's like a cool Netflix original. So in the chapter, they talk about people that, maybe for religious reasons or whatever, they really become divorced, but they just don't get divorced. They don't ever sign the papers, but in their hearts, in their home, they are divorced from each other. That really should never happen. Why? Because we should be able to work together as a team in a marriage and do stuff like this. Go through a book every couple of months, right? A lot of these books will have like questions at the end of chapters and things like that for discussion to help people, along in discussion. I'm pretty sure if you were to Google marriage date discussion questions or something like that, you'll find something. Conversation starters. I know actually maybe last time or a couple times ago when we did one of these family teachings, we actually, they found and passed out some like conversation starters. It was like a list of like 20 questions or something like that you could go out on a date, you could just sit down, and we'll talk a little bit about couch time, sit down and talk and chat and throw these things out there and converse, actually talk to each other. So, I would say that, when it comes to like a good marriage, good marriages are not going to end in divorce. But just because your marriage doesn't end in divorce does not mean it's a good marriage. So, not getting divorced is one of the factors, probably a pretty big one, of a good marriage. Right? But just because you don't get divorced, right? Not divorce does not equal good marriage, because you can have that right there that she talks about. You have a horrible household, arguing or isolation or whatever it is, and you just never signed the papers. So what we should do is what? What do we need to do, Mike? Need to talk more, right? So that actually leads me right into this next portion here. The lifeline of a good marriage is what? Boom. Well, yes, Jesus. Extra points to Mike. But in the book, in this chapter, it's communication. Being able to talk about stuff. Somebody has unrealistic expectations, let's sit down, chat, talk about that. Somebody's feeling isolated or they are isolating themselves, sit down and have a chat about that. Right? You're trying to get into a conversation and somebody's always withdrawing and driving off or whatever it is. Talk about that. Now, obviously, and we've talked about last week, and I've mentioned before, that really we should not look at marital counseling as a negative thing. Like, ooh, man, you're going to marriage counseling? One of those folks. Well, I mean, marriage counseling actually can be a really good thing to go to. But sometimes it's hard for people to do communication. I mean, we grow up, right? Most people that I'm around, okay, this is America, and there are just a lot of people out there that their parents, not exactly the ones you want to look at and be like, I'm going to do it just like mom and dad. Because if you did, you're going to end up like mom and dad. Mom and dad were married three or five times, right? Or they were we'll never get a divorce. But, you know, they were in separate bedrooms. And, I mean, you know, it was like, well, I mean, okay. So we don't grow up a lot of times learning how to do communication. You just don't know how to do it. And there's some people that could just pick up a book and be those self-starters, grab a book, hey, let's read this together, talk through it, do the buy the workbook online and go through this, and they'll do it and they can learn it themselves. But let's be honest, most people are not self-starters. Otherwise, when you got into a business or you hired somebody that was a go-getter and a self-starter and a leader, you wouldn't care because all your people are that way. That's the normal way people are. Well, people are not normally that way. People are normally not self-starters. They usually don't have that initiative to go out and just dig it out for themselves. So often they need someone to guide them and help them. And that's, right. And what we understand from that is marriage counseling can do that. Going to someone who at least knows more than you. Now, going to somebody that's in the exact same boat as you, I would recommend not doing that, right? But it doesn't have to be, somebody that's, 3 times your age, or somebody that, man, they've been married 105 years. So now I think they've learned a few things. Remember, it doesn't matter. There's people who've been married for 5 decades that I would not recommend my worst enemy to go to marriage counseling. Well, they've been together for 50 years. Yeah, it's a miracle one of their necks haven't been sliced open in the middle of the night. That's evidence right there, proof positive there's a God, right? But that's the way it is. And again, so length of time that someone's been married, is a factor, but sometimes you got to really look at the people. Not sometimes, always. It's not the factor. So go to somebody. Doesn't mean you got to sign up for 17 years of counseling, but maybe you just, hey, we want to learn how to communicate a little bit better. Do you have some ways or a book or some way for us to kind of get into that vein and start doing that? There's nothing wrong with that. And the thing is, I use this example all the time, so some of you probably heard it, but the thing is, when we go to school, right, you're in 10th grade, 9th grade, you're learning geometry. Or not, right? But, let's say you are learning geometry. You sit there and you've never even heard the word geometry. You're like, is that similar to geography? Are you expected, do they walk in there and be like, all right, guys, final exam is on the desk already. You guys have an hour and a half. I'll be over here sitting down on Facebook. No. They teach you about geometry. And if you want to learn, you're probably going to ask questions about geometry. You're going to study and do homework on geometry. This is how you're going to learn. So why is it when we come to things like marriage, what do? Oh, we should already know. We should just know that. That's just something that we should, have down. Why? Remember last time we said, man, we wouldn't want that taught in schools. Hey, Bo, I think that might be gain. Turn my gain down a little bit. See if that does something to that, whatever that is. Sounds like somebody's playing crazy frisbee or something in the house speaker there. Well, we'll have to figure that out. Anyway, so we have to know and understand it's okay not to know how to have a great marriage. If you've never had one, you're learning, you're growing, you're developing. We are all growing and developing in our marriages. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. It's the house speaker. Yeah. So just maybe turn my gain up a little bit and turn the house down a little bit. So there we go. I think that worked. So I was just going to push through it, but I was scanning the audience and realizing that there are people in here that will not be able to tune that out. I was like, I'll just push through. It's okay. Just talk a little loud. People are going, like, no, we all do. We do all hear it. We're just ignoring it. Like, I was watching different faces like, are other people hearing this? Are they coming for me? So, don't be ashamed that you don't know what you don't know. Don't know how to have a great marriage. Been married for 15 years. You've stayed together, but it's not been what you would call like, absolutely, man, I am in a great marriage. Have one. How do you have one? You learn how to have one. Learn how to have a good marriage. And that's what we're doing tonight, but I would encourage you, get other books, do this for yourself. Don't always wait for, some big thing at the church. Or get some counseling from somebody. Hey, what are some good books? Or can we sit with you and talk through some things? And maybe that's what you need, is a little bit of a referee at times, depending on the topic or the subject. It's something that, she always isolates and withdraws, or it's something that as soon as it's brought up, he's pounding his fist. No! Right? So, okay, let's get somebody else up in here to help us to communicate. So, she talks about couch time in chapter 3, and who remembers what she recommends, how much time per week minimum for couch time? Right? 20 to 30 minutes every week. And what are we supposed to talk about there? Are we supposed to, that's when we have our list of all the things that need to get fixed? No, that's time to sit down and talk. Have some interaction. Gaze into each other's eyes for a solid 20 minutes. So, what are some of the, you guys remember some of the, actually, she went to James chapter 1 to talk about the way to engage in conversation, in communication, in couch time, and things like that. You remember what she said? Every person should be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to get angry, right? So let's write that down. So it was, you should be slow for what? Slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. And I think, that's really That's really a good just way to do it. Sit down, talk, don't get angry, right? Now, again, it is not the easiest thing to sit down if someone's expressing or just talking about things, especially if it's something like that needs to get fixed, and you're the issue, to sit there and hear that. I mean, it's not the easiest thing. We need to just talk about a little something. I'm feeling this, or the other day when you just snapped at me and threw that chair through the window, and hit my grandmother and killed her. I just think we should talk about that, right? I mean, I'm being facetious, but we do need to be able to sit down and talk and not get angry, right? And she talks about validation, right? Validating their what? Right. Validating their feelings, right? So everybody just say this with me. Feelings do not equal facts. But feelings are true. Everybody understand what I'm saying there? I just made that up on the fly, actually, but I think it works. Feelings do not equal facts, but feelings are nevertheless true. So, what do I mean by that? Honey, I just feel like you've been neglecting me. Well, two people sit down. Have you been neglecting him? And she says, well, I've been taking care of the house, taking care of the kids. I got him a card the other day just for whatever. Every night, the last 7 nights, I've had dinner on the table. I made his bath, massaged his feet, made sure he was in bed at a good time, right? But he feels neglected. Now, objectively, factually, how many people would be like, oh, you poor neglected darling? No, we'd be like, dude, you got a good thing going, bro, right? But the fact that he feels that way makes it true. And so that has to be dealt with. So that's where that conversation, well, why do you feel that way? Because you could list, you could say, and if you've been through the 5 love languages with us when we did that several months ago, was that a year ago? My goodness. Or if you've read that before, one way that can be true is that you're showing love in a way they don't really receive love. So in the 5 love languages, they've got 5 different ways that people can show or receive love. One of them is giving gifts, for instance. Another one is quality time. So if someone's love language, what they really like is quality time. They want quality time. This is important, actually, especially in our materialistic society. When someone wants quality time, and of course, it's not like you have this one love language or 2, you don't care about the others. Most people have a top 1 or 2, but they want all of them, okay? So you like quality time, and your spouse is off 95 hours a week working hard, bringing home the bacon, and every 3 days, there is a new gift somewhere in the house for you to open. It's a new watch, it's a new dress, it's a gift card to go get, massage and a facial. But your love language, what you really like, is quality time. Are you going to feel loved? You're not going to feel loved. You got an answer for that? Right. And again, this is exactly how it happens. Now, if they've read the 5 love languages, they're communicating this kind of stuff, they're going to know, oh, see, they're trying to show me love, but I'm not feeling it because I don't care about a new dress. I want time with you, bro. Right? Or vice versa. Right? Here she is, acts of service. He comes home and dishes are done. Goes in his drawer. Laundry is done. Goes into the bathroom. Sparkling in here. Right? So she's doing all these acts of service. But he, like, my granny, how big your eyes are, right? Like, I must be in the wrong house or something. But his love language is words of affirmation, which is one of the words, right? Or one of the love languages. So she doesn't really do that much. In fact, she's a little choice with her words, a little cutting, you know. He'll come home and that's all done, and he gets a little like, hope you worked hard. I know I did all day. Right? Something like that. Is he going to feel loved? I mean, everything's clean. Who wouldn't like a clean house? But you see the point. The point is the love is not being felt. It's being given, but it's not being felt. So, this is true. Feelings are not necessarily facts, but if someone has that feeling, it is true, right? Now again, doesn't mean the underlying facts are true. The fact that they feel that is true. And as a spouse, we have to deal with that. You cannot deal with just facts. As much as I really wish we could. Because I'm more of a factual type, logical, analytical type of person. So if my wife says, I feel like you've been neglecting me and the kids, I'm immediately, even after teaching this, I am going to go home. And if she said that, I'm immediately going to be like, what do you mean? We just went to blah, blah, blah. We're going to Sun West tomorrow. That doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to go watch this again. I'm telling you, that does not matter. The fact that she feels that way, I need to validate those feelings. Oh, okay. I am so sorry you felt that way. What? Well, she didn't say, I feel like you haven't bought me anything. She said, I feel like you haven't been with me and the kids. But do you want a purse? So, she's like, what lady doesn't want a new purse? I saw it on Amazon. No, I just found out about it too. So, we do have to be mindful of the feelings of our spouse because they are legitimate. So, for instance, you come home, spouse says, I feel, is that true or false? It's true. They feel that way. Trying to bring facts into, well, look at here, that is not going to work. In fact, it will probably have the opposite effect. You know what you're doing? You're explaining factually how they are wrong, but they know they feel this way.
Both people should share their feelings nicely.
You should definitely share your feelings nicely. Yes, that's a good point. I think Hannah had something too. What did you have, Hannah?
I don't remember. I think we kind of covered it.
Oh, okay. He texted me and said, hey, man, can you just glaze through this and try to not answer that question? I got your back, bro.
I think for the most part, Jeanette and I, what we try to do is, feelings are important.
Right.
So if you actually are saying something, you can actually use, well, these are my true feelings, this is exactly how I feel.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't change the fact of how I feel towards you.
Right.
These are my true feelings. Because if you don't do that, then it goes back to the first part when you flip that around. It becomes isolation. Then you get rage and so on and so forth.
Right.
I think it's good to express how you feel, but you need to say it in a way where it's going to be respectful to your spouse.
Exactly. So somebody give me an example, just shout it out, like a way to express feelings of you feel like you have been neglected. What's a way to express that to your spouse that doesn't make your spouse feel like you're an absolute jerk? In a card. So like a note?
Well, if it's isolation, or
No. I said, how would you express the feeling of neglect? So you feel neglected. What's a way to express that?
well, wouldn't you? If you're feeling neglect, that means you're wanting time. So I would probably want to take the initiative to like kind of break the ice, like me and you time.
Mm-hmm.
Get the kids, babysitter, just like hello.
Right, that's one way to do it. Set up some time, and maybe during that time, just say, honey, I've really been feeling like we've been missing some of this. You don't even have to specifically say the words, I feel like you've neglected me, right? You can just kind of do it in a way that, like Jennifer said, it's nice.
Like if you were to say, I know that you took off work a couple days early, could we still maybe plan on doing something just the two of us?
Right.
Affirming that he's already been taking initiative, but reminding them that you still need more.
Yes, but that's a good way to do it as opposed to, oh, yeah, see, that's a good, you see, he's like, time to gaze into your eyes, baby. Right. Right. And that's a lot more more receivable on the other end, right, than if you were to come at somebody with attitude. So obviously, when we're talking slow to speak, slow to get angry, I mean, when you start to say your feelings, it's probably not, I feel like I could put my fist through your face right now. Right? That's probably not a feeling you want to share, You might have that thought or that feeling, but some feelings you need to express in a way that's going to be, I feel upset would be the best way to say that, right? But we should. I feel underappreciated. I feel, that we've not been, pouring as much time into the kids as we should, or whatever it might be, and try to make it something that is, again, nice or palatable to somebody that's hearing it on the other side. Hannah.
I can give a non-example.
Ooh.
No, this isn't him. I'm talking for a friend.
This is a friend.
This is a friend.
Yeah,
No,
a friend at
when
work.
you know your spouse's love language and you tell them, you're like, oh, I had this really great idea. I was going to like do this for you, but then I decided to sleep instead. And then you tell them the idea and they're like, oh, that's really great, but why didn't you actually do it?
So, just, hypothetically, something like that happened. Honestly, in my personal opinion, now, sometimes everybody's different. This is opinion. The thought is not what counts. So for me, right, let's say, husband gets his wife, a card, love you, you're the greatest thing that ever happened to me. Aw, but then he's a total jerk for the next month. I mean, what is it that is true? The card, or was that card really just, you're supposed to do this or whatever, right? Getting flowers, right? Sometimes I'll stop by and just, grab flowers, whatever, for summer. And not every time, but a lot of times, people in the store joking around, oh, what'd you do? Yeah. Right? I didn't do anything. I'm building up some good favor right now for when I do something, she's going to scratch it off, you know what I'm saying? But it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that our actions don't really line up with, our thoughts. Oh, this is the thought that counts. The thought only counts when it actually is true and it manifests in action. Right? Talking about, I think Mireya talked about, getting away or, setting up a date or something like that. Well, talking about it is great, getting excited about it, but if it never actually happens, eventually that excitement is going to wear off. You're going to be like, okay, this never actually happened. Now I'm just getting frustrated. Right? That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. It's not the thought that counts. It's the action that counts, right? The thought that counts, Hallmark wants you to think that because they want you to buy a lot of cards. That's my opinion.
I just wanted to say, like, that kind of goes hand in hand with something that she mentioned in the book. With she brought up the fruit of the spirit and that how people they don't let all their fulfillment of what God wants in their marriage, and if we put that in our like singular relationship with God, it's gonna be the same way. We're gonna have problems with what we do on a daily basis. So if you don't put your like total like you do with your room like single relationship with God, then how can you move forward and past these things if you don't have that relationship with God and what God wants in your marriage too, as two people instead of
Right.
so that kind of goes hand in hand, like the action behind it. We're supposed to have the fruit of the spirit, but it's supposed to show in our marriage because that person's going to see you all the time. So that should be where it shows first, and then it'll lead out in every aspect of your life.
Right. And when we get to a little bit, chapter 5, I think just really, or chapter 4, I'm sorry, just really weaves into all of this. And so we'll hit that like quickly. But the fruit of the Spirit there, where it talks about humility, which is a fruit of the Spirit, is just a huge one that we need, especially for marriages. When you're going to be with somebody, lifelong, you're spending decades under the same roof with someone, you need a lot of humility. But before we get there, I want to talk real quick about the levels of conversation. You guys remember what they were? The first one was facts. Yes, opinions. Opinions, feelings, and beliefs. And, what her point really is that when we're married, facts, talking about the weather and sports and, that's kind of like way up here conversation. Right, your opinions, you might get a little deeper into the conversation. Then you start talking about feelings. Like, I don't really talk about my feelings a whole lot. I'm just going to be honest. I'm just not. I'm not I mean, she talks about in the book, like, most people think that's weak, and I do. I mean, I'm like, how do you feel? Good. How did that make you feel? What kind of Oprah Winfrey question is that? Like, what? What are you talking about? But again, we do have to be able to get there with people that we love, like our spouse. Now, you're not gonna do that with everybody. I mean, some people will, but whatever. But in intimate relationships, really strong relationships, we should be able to share feelings with someone and be able to have them validated and that kind of thing. And then beliefs, kind of deeper than your feelings, the underlying themes that are driving your feelings, right? If you feel insecure about something, there's probably an underlying belief that's causing the feeling of insecurity. If you feel let down, there's an underlying belief or expectation that caused you. If you don't have any expectations, it's hard to get let down. Like, I expect nothing out of this, this person at work. They're a schlub. Can't stand them. They don't get anything done. And then when they come in and actually do anything, you're like, oh, great. I have no expectations for you, right? They come in and do nothing, you're like, that's what I expected. So with our spouses, right, we need to be able to move from casual, coffee house, 30 minutes on my lunch break conversation with, a buddy and move into this realm here where we're talking about these. And that's, again, where some of that, what she talks about, couch time, gets into. It's having these deeper conversations with people rather than everything just kind of being surface all the time, where you're really more just like close buddies than a married couple, right? So did anybody get anything out of that or have anything? Taylor. Loud.
So on the beliefs part, they were saying about like how they only talk about their beliefs
Time to be spiritual.
You know, even when you're reading, I send him scripture, I'm like, did you realize that said that or whatever, you know? And we just have like those conversations about that. I could imagine just keeping that to myself or anything until Sunday or Wednesday.
Right, and that's one level of beliefs, but that's where it gets into discussions like we talked about last time, like before you get married, right? Premarital counseling should get to the core of beliefs about things. Beliefs about raising kids, beliefs about certainly things of salvation, and beliefs about how in-laws should work, like how much interaction do we need to have, right? Those are all things that, like, beliefs that you're going to have, bringing it into a marriage. You kind of want to get those worked out before, if possible, right? And most of the time it is possible, but most people don't get real marital counseling before they get married. They just kind of jump into it and then, oh my goodness, this major issue here. And I was all taken aback, and there's so much chemistry, just a whirlwind of love and romance. I totally missed the fact that you don't even believe in God, and I'm a devout Christian. How did I miss that, right? I mean, but stuff like that can happen. It's like, what were you thinking? But we should, obviously, in a marriage, be able to get into those deep conversations, and certainly before marriage, we should get down to some of those core beliefs about things so that it doesn't cause us problems in the marriage. Now, chapter 5, real quick. Chapter 4, I keep saying that. Thanks for keeping me honest, Mireya. In chapter 4, humility. Right, or, some in the Bible, sometimes you'll see meekness, right? But it's humility. And then this one, humility and forgiveness. So everybody understand about pride? There's a lot of scriptures on pride that she shared. And pride is just a nasty, nasty, nasty thing. Okay? Pride, really, the Bible, I think it's Ezekiel, where it talks about, you were there before the heavenly throne, and you did all this stuff and you were perfect until pride was found in you, right? Talking about Lucifer. Pride caused the fall of the angels. Pride caused the fall of man. Now, when we think sin, we usually go to sins of action. Yeah, they committed adultery, they lied, they murdered somebody, but it's very easy for people to come to church and have things like pride in them, and unless you're close to them, you wouldn't know that they're a very proud person. But pride is not good. Pride is a sin. But pride can really mess people up in their marriages because, again, they wouldn't acknowledge a problem with them. And I'll be honest, just a little bit of discernment when you're counseling or talking to people or around people. It's not that difficult when people are proud to tell that they are. Now, just because you know that they are doesn't mean you'd be like, you're proud! But you can tell when somebody is, okay? And we just have to pray and try to make sure that we are humble. Humility is a fruit of the Spirit. When we have the Spirit, it's something that should be cultivated and grown in our lives. And in the chapter, she talks about both asking for forgiveness, right, and forgiving. And talks about the sort of the art of the apology, right? The apology that's not really an apology. I'm sorry, but if you hadn't, is that an apology? I mean, I'm sorry, but equals not I'm sorry. Right? I mean, and I'm sorry, and then you did it again. And then you're sorry, and you did it again. And you're sorry, and you did it again. Is that sorry? That's not sorry. That's just, I'm supposed to say I'm sorry, or I was caught, or whatever. What does sorrow really look like? What does godly sorrow lead to, according to the Bible, actually? It leads to repentance. Repentance means you change, right? The Bible says the sorrow of the world brings death, because sorrow of the world, you don't change anything. You're sorry you got caught, you're sorry for the consequences, but you're not really sorry. When you're sorry and it's godly sorrow, you change. Now, change may take some time if it's an innate characteristic that you've grown up with or whatever, but you change. You don't just keep doing it, sorry. That is not how it works. But we should all strive to be humble. When you're humble, it's not as easy to get your feelings hurt. I mean, it's not that you're impervious, but it's not as easy because you don't take yourself so seriously. And you also empathize with the other person, right? You realize that sometimes that anger or that nasty what they just said was because they were stressed out all day. And you can remember, 3 days ago, you did the same thing. And you are humble enough to be like, look, I did the same thing, or I do the same thing. I'll give some grace here. I'll show some mercy here, which is characteristics like God, as opposed to everything's not going my way. And the art of the apology, I think, is a really cool way to think about when we apologize. It should be heartfelt. We should mean it. We should say it. And she actually says you should say what you did and how it hurt them. And I think the example she used was, I'm sorry I made plans without you, and that made you feel like you're not important. And then ask for forgiveness. Will you forgive me for doing this? And I will try not to do it again. Or I won't do it again. Well, I won't do it again. I'd say I try not to do it again because you might end up doing it again. But you should change your behavior. Going forward, I'm going to include you. Right? Now, has anybody ever had something like that happen? Your spouse made plans, didn't tell you, and you were like, never. Never has happened. Of course, it happens, because we're all human. We just think, sometimes we even thought we told them. We had a whole conversation in our head that never actually happened. Yeah, remember we talked about that. When did we talk about it? The other day. What day? I don't know, the day. I think it was daytime-ish, right? But we all do it. And if we're humble, okay, yes, it could upset you, or look, there's a conflict, now I can't do it, or something like that. But if we're humble, we realize we're all human. That happens. It's an honest mistake. I wasn't trying to be your boss or sneak and do something and you're now you got to do it. It wasn't anything nefarious. It was an honest mistake. And when we're humble, we realize we're human and we make honest mistakes and we show grace. However, we should ask for forgiveness and we should be willing to forgive. Doesn't the Bible say to forgive? What does the Bible say that Jesus has the right to do if we don't forgive people? He cannot forgive you, right? But even more than that, the parable that he uses is the servant came to the master, owes tons of money. The master says, I forgive you your debt. The servant turns around and goes to another servant who owes him, peanuts, won't forgive him, throws him in jail. The master comes and finds out about it and does what? Does he say, going forward, I'm not going to forgive you? What does he do? He takes the old debt that was forgiven, puts it back on him. And then Jesus says what? So shall my heavenly Father do to you if you don't forgive others? Dude. Bro, like think about that. You know, you got all these sins and things that God's forgiven you of built up over. I mean, we're human, right? I mean, if you've lived, you've done some stuff that need forgiven. But if we turn, our heart gets to the point where we will not forgive others, God reserves the right to say, it's back on you. Ouch. He's a loving God. He would never, Jesus said it, it's in red. Kind of an inside joke. I can see them there with the papyri. Can you hand me the red quill, please? This was Jesus speaking. Anyway, we won't talk about that right now. So, humility and forgiveness are vital pieces of a marriage. And if we should be forgiving anybody, it should be our spouse, right? But that's usually the hardest people to forgive because they should know better, you know? Or, we're with them all the time. We just talked about this like 15 times. No! But I don't remember Jesus saying, forgive everybody, but if you're married, he's like, I didn't get married, now you know why. No, he didn't do that. Instead, he said, you need to forgive, and that includes our spouses. So anybody have anything else on chapters 4 or 5 that we need to cover, should go over? Right. Oh, it is 4 and 5 on the audio book. That's right, because the first one is the intro. So it is 4 and 5. I don't think that's why I'm saying it, but I'll use that as an excuse. I appreciate the lifeline. But that's why my original post said, hey, we're going to go through chapters 1 and 2. Or no, I said 1 through 3, and then I went back and edited it. It was like, no, we're going to do 1 and 2, because the book is 1 and 2. So, any other questions or comments or anything on chapters 1, 2, 3, or 4? Nope, going once, going twice, yes.
No, I was just going to say, keep in mind what she said at the beginning about, who this book is for, and that we need to remember that in some marriages, and lots of marriages, things go a lot deeper than just surface things, and like the guys with daddy issues and stuff like that. That if we have one of these walls, we really do need to pray and self-reflect and figure out why we have those walls, and not blame our spouse for them, but rather to dig deep and try to figure out where it began and ask.
Can I get amen? Praise God. Aren't you glad that you don't do it just in the human secular vein, right? God sure makes it a lot easier. When your spouse is prayed up, way easier to be humble, easier to be forgiving, all that stuff. And so it's vitally important that we be, as Taylor said, right, individually prayerful, but also together, right? We can include each other and be prayerful together as well. And, I know it's so cliche, but a couple that prays together stays together. Now, I don't mean religiously prays together, like we check the box and in case anybody asks, yes, we prayed together. Right? I mean, really, you're bringing prayer requests to each other, you're binding together in prayer, you're praying for one another. I mean, a wife that wakes up and prays a covering over her husband every day, it's going to be a lot harder for her to get angry or upset and this kind of stuff. A husband that wakes up and prays over his wife, prays over his children, it's more difficult, right? So we need to make sure we're praying and we're prayerful people. Amen. All right, well, look at that. 8:35 and a half. Oh, see, and look, it was 8:30 and I stopped. Then we had more stuff. So here we go. Homework, yeah. There was homework last week. Hopefully everybody did it. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but we're not going to do any homework this week particularly. I didn't really, except read chapters 5 and 6. All right, love you guys. If you're going to Sunwest Park with us tomorrow to hang out at the beach, we are, I think we're trying to get everybody there around 10. It's about an hour and a half drive, so that means you'll have to leave around 8:30ish to get there. But see you guys there for some fun in the sun.